You're listening to an archived Cabral Concept podcast. After listening to this show, check out the most up-to-date podcasts available at stephencabral.com/podcasts or search directly on iTunes. And now, welcome to the Cabral Concept, where board-certified naturopath and integrative health practitioner Dr. Stephen Cabral shares how he was diagnosed at the age of 17 with a life-altering illness and given no hope for recovery. It was only after studying and traveling all over the world did he discover how to combine ancient Ayurvedic healing practices with state-of-the-art naturopathic and functional medicine to fully rebalance the body and re-energize it with life. It's time to discover how to get well, lose weight, and finally feel alive again. And now, here's your host, Dr. Stephen Cabral.
Thank you for joining me today on this Weight Loss and Wellness Wednesday. Happy to have you, and really looking forward to taking you through this relatively new concept called inflammaging. And essentially what inflammaging is a premature breaking down of the body, or that nagging sensation where it's kind of like, well, if the knee isn't hurting today, then the back is stiff, the brain fog's there. And I'm going to take you through a lot of that today and really how it can be combated, pushed back, and reversed. So the interesting thing is I always like to start with a little bit of research, or at least give you a little bit of what the science says, so that you know that these aren't things that are just kind of a certain sect of the natural health-based world, right? This is taking place over all forms of medicine and really for thousands of years, which I want to explain at the end, and what we're doing from all sides in order to help people, I would say, live longer, stronger lives. And when I say longer, stronger, I mean that I can help you live longer. I really believe that. But I also want to help you to live a long and great quality of life. Meaning that when you're 70 and 80 years old, I want you out there playing tennis, playing golf, playing with your grandkids. I want you really preparing your own meals and really being self-sufficient. I want you being healthy. I want you really enjoying life, loving life, and just feeling like a kid, like honestly, feeling absolutely amazing, because that's the opposite of what we have right now. Really, as people start to get into their 50s and definitely 60s, if you can hold it off till 60s, well, you're probably doing well. But what's happening now is that we have people on a cocktail of pharmaceuticals, which are literally zapping their ATP, their energy, which I'm going to be talking about more in the future. And they really feel like they have half the life that they used to have, meaning like they have half the energy. The only way they make it through the day is with a lot of caffeine or some type of stimulant, whatever it might be. And then they need another cocktail to go to bed to reduce anxiety, whatever it might be. And again, these things are not healthy. People are on statins, they're on proton pump inhibitors, they're on things for their cholesterol and their blood pressure, and then the type 2 diabetes and everything else, right? And so what happens is all of those pharmaceuticals, though, also come at a cost. And they come at an energy-based cost and a dysregulation of the system, meaning that we're using that pharmaceutical. It's helping to, well, I would say mask, but it's helping to balance one part of the system, which means, for example, a statin. It's helping to not produce that large amount of cholesterol, eliminate the cholesterol from the body. But then what will happen is essentially the weakening of the heart muscle and all the actual, not just cardiac tissue, but also skeletal muscle as well. And we're lowering the ATP output, which means the energy output. So, okay, we have people now with low cholesterol, but now they're walking zombies, right? They have nothing left, and now they start getting muscle cramps, and they can't exercise, and it just goes downhill. So what do? Well, okay, we have this person who has typically high cholesterol, and do we put them on a statin or not put them on the statin? Well, the truth is this, is that we need to have more than one choice. You can't just give people, well, the choice is this, high cholesterol, take your statin. No, there's so many choices in between that. And that's what we try to talk about here on the Cabral Concept. And that's just one part of inflammaging. So I already gave away the first one, which would be, sometimes tending towards high cholesterol. That's a form of inflammaging. Inflammaging is essentially larger amounts of inflammation as you age. And it's uncontrolled inflammation, meaning that your body is no longer able to keep it in check. You need to reach for the ibuprofen, the aspirin, the Tylenol, the whatever, right? Any different things to reduce that inflammation as you're getting older. Well, here's the thing. It looks like different things to different people. And that's why I want to give you the research behind it. Actually, why don't I do that right now? So in 2014, the National Institute for Health, this is published on PubMed, for the first time looked at inflammaging. They considered it a real thing. And this is what they said. Human aging is characterized by a chronic low-grade inflammation. And this phenomenon has been termed Inflammaging. Inflammaging is a highly significant risk factor for both morbidity and mortality in elderly people, as most, if not all, age-related diseases share an inflammatory pathogenesis. Nevertheless, the precise etiology of inflammaging and its potential causal role in contributing to adverse health outcomes remain largely unknown. Now, that was 2014. Here's the deal. I was studying with Dr. Jeffrey Bland and a bunch of the great doctors at the Institute for Functional Medicine, which is ifm.org. If you are a doctor, health practitioner, meaning like a nurse, an MD, a DO, a chiropractor, you can study at the Institute for Functional Medicine for postdoctoral work, or actually even so I tell a lot of functional medicine students, naturopathic doctoral students that I mentor, that a great thing would be to start to study at the Institute for Functional Medicine if you have the finances. And the reason is they give you like half price if you're a student to study there. So, and it's a great place. It really is. I think it was, really nice. It is expensive, but again, like education's expensive. That's just the world we live in. But we were learning about inflammaging, and I studied with them in 2011. So 2010, 2011, I believe. So, here's the deal. We were already talking about it back then, and it was going on before I was there. So that's why I have to tell you this. Everything that we talk about in the Cabral concept and that you listen to another podcast and you read in other books, all of it is real. It's just not published yet. And the problem is, and again, even though this study was published, I'm guaranteeing your MD, if you ever mention the word inflammaging, would say, oh, that's ridiculous. There's no scientific proof behind that. But I just gave you, like it is. It's published. It's just medical doctors, your regular PCP, even specialists, they don't have the time. Well, technically they do because we all have the time, right? They aren't doing the research. That's the bottom line. They aren't looking to new things that are happening all the time because it's out there. And you really just need to dedicate yourself to looking at these new publications. And you'd find it. But, what did I talk about? Well, I talked about inflammation as a highly significant risk factor for morbidity and mortality, meaning like, okay, poor quality of life, early death in elderly people. What else we talk about? Well, it's in all diseases relates to this thing they called it inflammatory pathogenesis. What does that mean? Like, what do these words mean? Okay, well, it means that as part of the disease process, the pathogenesis of the disease, at least part of that process is inflammation, which I've said a million times before, completely agree. The problem is that we treat the inflammation in conventional medicine and in natural medicine. But inflammation is not the cause of the disease. Inflammation is a precursor to the dis-ease, which is the name that we give to a disease such as high cholesterol, high blood pressure, rheumatoid arthritis, Barrett's, esophageal, you name it, right? So inflammation is always a precursor because why? Well, inflammation, and I'm going to talk about that in a moment, is caused by an immune process or some of the process in the body where the body is fighting its own little war inside. And what we're looking at, the carnage, is the inflammation. Tissue destruction, right? Or any type of try and repair-based process is going to be characterized by inflammation. Now, inflammation in itself is actually part of a healing-based process. The problem is it can become overwhelming, and it becomes overwhelming because the body is really in a state of imbalance. It can't remove the pathogens, the microbes, anything that's in your body, whether it's a virus or whether it's a yeast, fungal base, bacterial, whatever it might be. And it's constantly fighting that. So I'm going to get to that in a moment because I don't want to give all that away yet. That's going to be what I move into. I want to give you some examples, though, of inflammaging, okay? Inflammaging is this: weight gain where you seem to gain weight easier. It's not as easy to take it off. And your body looks overall a little softer, a little puffier, a little bit more swollen. That swollen look, that puffy look, a lot of that is water weight. It's actually not body fat, meaning that, yes, your fat and your subcutaneous fat, we'll call it that. That's the fat between essentially the muscle and the skin, okay? But the rest of your body can begin to hold water. And that's because of that inflammation, that increase in white blood cells attacking, well, it could be systemic as well. Like, let's just say you have food sensitivities, unrecognized food sensitivities. Or you have the waste products from the environment or from your gut spilling into your bloodstream. Well, then you're going to cause an immune-based cascade, which again, we'll chat about in a second, that's causing inflammation throughout the entire body. So weight gain is definitely a big part of it, and having more difficulty losing it, because with all of this inflammation and all of this fight or flight-based response, the thyroid will begin to slow. All right, so that, of course, goes with sluggishness. If you're feeling more sluggish, more run down, a little bit more groggy, especially getting up in the morning, these are all things that are part of the inflammatory-based process. Skin not looking as vibrant, like your hair, your skin, your nails. When you look at a person, sometimes you think they're younger or older simply based on what does their hair look like? What does their skin look like? What are their teeth, their nails? Like, what does all the things that contain that protein look like? Because if your body's breaking down faster than it's building back up, well, that protein breaks down faster as well. All right, higher cholesterol I mentioned, higher blood pressure. Sometimes the liver enzymes start to get elevated in people too. That's part of the inflammaging process. Again, all of this can be reversed. We're going to talk about that in a moment. A big thing is a lower threshold for immunity, meaning like you get sick a little bit more often, or when you get a cold, you're not able to get rid of it in a couple days. It takes you instead a week or maybe 2 weeks. Lowered metabolism, lowered thyroid. And again, I chatted about that before, but that can start to be like cold hands, cold feet, where you never used to get that before in your 20s, 30s, or maybe even early 40s. Lower libido, or maybe just like less ambition or drive in life. They really go one and the same. They honestly do. And that's why I typically follow up one with the other. If libido is low, ambition drive is typically low, meaning like it's that alpha hormone, right? It's not just testosterone. It's actually dopamine, testosterone, norepinephrine, serotonin. It's all the neurotransmitters, as well as all the hormones, cortisol, DHEA, and certainly testosterone as well. It's all of those being optimized. And what happens is during this inflammation or inflammaging process, our body gets worn down from there constantly being a war zone inside of our body. Because of that, our hormones start to go down. I'm going to give you the kind of step-by-step adrenal exhaustion profile in the future because I want you to be able to kind of rate yourself of where you are in terms of adrenal-based fatigue or adrenal-based exhaustion. Because again, back in the day, when I was a really sick kid, no one believed in adrenal fatigue. Like that was a big laughing joke until they saw me with Addison's disease. And of course, that wasn't a joke, meaning like that is actual adrenal-based exhaustion. But the problem is back in the day, they didn't believe there were stages. They still really don't today. Honestly, most MDs don't believe there are today. You either have Cushing's disease, which is too much cortisol, or Addison's disease, which is really no cortisol. But there's a whole huge spectrum in between. That's the problem that conventional medicine misses. They see the top 2.5%, which is, again, where your blood work is off, and the bottom 2.5%. I don't know if you know that, but that's how blood work works. Essentially, when you get your blood drawn, and again, conventional medicine doesn't look at urine. Well, they do just from a dipstick-based perspective, but they don't look at all the different microbes in the urine. They don't look at the hormones in the saliva. They don't look at metals and minerals in the hair tissue mineral analysis. Sometimes they do a stool analysis, but very, very infrequently. So essentially what I'm saying is this, is that they see the disease state in the bottom 2.5%, which is out of range, and the top 2.5%, which is out of range. That's it. So what does that mean? Well, they missed 95% of all people that are suffering right now. That's the truth. So that's why when I talked about before, the book, which I mentioned before, is my doctor says I'm fine, so why do I feel so sick? And my mentor wrote that book. And so when I look at that and I'm like, yeah, well, that's exactly me. Like, that's me. Back before, of course, now life is good, so I can laugh about it. But, back before, it was like all these specialists. Specialist after specialist. Over 24. That was just in the first couple of years. Over 24. I was at doctor appointment after doctor appointment every week, multiple times per week. Nobody could figure it out. And that's because they were looking in all the wrong places. I wasn't part of that 2.5% of the top, 2.5% at the bottom until they started to run, of course, specialized lab tests. Well, here's what's going on. I mentioned all these different things going on from metabolism to low energy to then high blood pressure and autoimmune-based disease and even cancer. These are all processes of inflammaging. Well, really what we're talking about, what doesn't happen when you're in your teens and 20s? Well, it's this analogy by it's death by 1,000 tiny cuts. And I believe there's an analogy around that. Whereas you're just getting these tiny cuts, literally all throughout life. It's just okay, little cut. And they just wear on you after a while. This is actually the perfect analogy for high cholesterol. One of the reasons the body moves into high cholesterol and blood work is because of inflammation. And you actually have these tiny cuts inside of the arteries, and your body uses cholesterol as a plaque to help patch up that inflammation and those cuts. It does the same thing in your brain with Alzheimer's. And hopefully you tuned into my 3-part Alzheimer's based one, which the last show was on 7/46. It was just yesterday, okay? So I gave you a 3-part series. But when your brain is producing this thing called amyloid beta plaque, or it's a protein essentially, when it's creating that, yes, it's then there's going to be missignaling, miscutting of the different synapses. But what happens is it's actually doing that as some part of a protective mechanism. Same with cholesterol. So if you say, okay, I'm going to go on a statin and I'm going to block my cholesterol production. Okay, now you're saying, well, I'm going to still leave all that inflammation going in my arteries because I'm not taking care of that. That's why, along with cholesterol, you have to run CRP and homocysteine on your blood work. It's just a must. You have to do that so that you look at the whole inflammation-based profile. Plus, I can't recommend enough running an omega-3 test. The omega-3 test is just one of those labs that you just have to run. I'm going to link up everything today. I'm going to link up my big 5 lab tests, which I would recommend. Of course, the omega-3 test. Let's talk about it a little bit more now, because here's the interesting thing. This was very, very interesting to me. Is that, okay, 2014, National Institute for Health, no idea what causes inflammation. 2 years later, let's see, 2 years later, almost exact, an update on Inflammaging, mechanisms, prevention, and treatment. And this, again, is on PubMed. That's the exact name of the study, an update on Inflammaging, mechanisms, prevention, and treatment. I'll link it up in the show notes today. For everyone listening today, go to steamcabral.com/747. I'm going to link up the PubMed studies. This is actually a pretty good study to read. I really enjoy reading it. Obviously, if you've been studying functional medicine, we're like, yeah, where were you, a decade ago or 2 decades ago? But still, better late than never. And I'm really a believer in that, because people think that, sometimes they think if they're just tuning in that I'm against conventional medicine. I'm not. I actually wish conventional medicine would just push so much harder and be truly integrative. They never will, because it's pharmaceutical-based run, and most naturopathic doctors, naturopaths, natural health practitioners know that there's very little, if ever, a need for pharmaceuticals. Like there might, in an acute-based circumstance, a couple days, couple weeks, just to really heal the body in an acute-based state. Meaning not heal it, meaning like prevent it from dying. Like that's the big thing. And obviously that's super important, of course. So I don't deny that. But in the long term, if you're using a pharmaceutical, you're really treating a symptom and masking things in the future, which is not a good thing. Now, is there a time and place for pharmaceuticals? Yes. Like sometimes there is. There really is. Like what if you're missing your thyroid? If you don't have a thyroid, should you not take thyroid medication? No, you'll probably need some. Again, but it's a case-by-case basis, and you just have to look at it that way as well. I just know for the most part, there's really never a reason to use pharmaceuticals how we use them today. So again, like the American Medical Association is a private medical association, meaning like it's not always in the best interests of us, unfortunately, but it is what it is. Okay, and everything that I talk about on the Cabral Concepts and everything we talk about in functional medicine and in natural health, nothing, you can't patent any of it, which means that if I recommend a specific product, such as, let's just say magnesium. Let's just go with that. Well, there's no patent on magnesium. You can go with any functional medicine-based brand that you trust. That's a really good company, and that's third-party tested to make sure there's no heavy metals or anything like that. But again, you can't patent that, which is a great thing. I don't want all of these things to be patentable. I want it to be open source. I want it to be for everyone in the world, not just the elite who can afford a certain medication. Like, again, some medications right now are $100,000 a year. How ridiculous is that? I mean, who can afford $100,000 a year medication? Completely insane. And then to put that on health insurance too, well, that's why our health insurance costs are just absolutely ridiculous. I mean, it's a broken system, but I'm not going to get into that today. All right, so let's pull this together. What I would like to share with you now is of how this inflammaging process essentially takes place. It takes place because of stress within the body. And again, we kind of know that, but what does that mean? Well, it means exogenously, meaning that we take in plastics and environmental estrogens just from staring at a computer screen. We breathe in smog and pollution outside. And then those are just some outside things like heavy metals and aluminum and all those things from tap water, fluoride. So then endogenously, though, we also create our own stress hormones. And it's the metabolites from end products of cortisol or estrogen, or it could be things like our own or overproduction of yeast overgrowth. Candida overgrowth is a real thing. It's fermenting of the gut, causing bloating, causing gas, and causing really a disruption in the microbiome in the gut. And that could be bacterial overgrowth, such as SIBO. It could be Crohn's. It could be colitis. And, with Crohn's and colitis, there's really an absorption-based issue, meaning that you're not able to absorb all the great nutrients that you're taking in your diet as well. And that's a huge issue that's not talked about enough too. So poor absorption, your body's not able to combat now all the stresses because it can't manufacture the B vitamins, the vitamin K that's really made in the jejunum as well in the intestine. So really, really important. What else? Oxidation. So in general, oxidation takes place whenever we exercise, but it really takes it to the next level when we get like a sunburn, we get, too much sun, or we get heavy metals. We get heavy metals can come from many, many different things. And again, it comes from cosmetics that people put on their skin, shampoos, conditioners, soaps, moisturizers, sunscreens. That's a huge one that no one ever talks about. I've talked about that in the past. Just go to stephencabral.com/podcast, type in sunscreen. You'll see the safe sunscreens I recommend, and you'll see all the harmful carcinogens in sunscreens. Believe it or not, in sunscreen, which is meant to protect you against skin cancer, right? Well, the stuff in sunscreen, most sunscreen actually causes cancer. Scientifically proven, and I give you the evidence and show you exactly what that is. That's going to be in my upcoming book as well. Just scary, scary things but we can stay away from it. Here's the good news. The more we learn, the more we grow, the more we can really protect ourselves. I honestly believe that. And I really believe that's why the people in my practice, the people I see, the people who are following the protocols are getting healthier and they're feeling better now than they ever have any time in their life. That includes being a teenager. That includes being in your 20s. You're feeling better now in your 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s plus. And the reason is because you're removing the harmful chemicals from your body and you're starting to put back in the good nutrition. Okay? Bottom line, less toxins in, more toxins out. Replace yourself with a nutrition. That's how the body works. It really does. It's not simple. It's very, very complex. But when you look at it, that's all you need to do. That's honestly all you need to do. So another big thing are these things called cytokines. So too many cytokines create a pro-inflammatory based environment. This can happen from fried foods, processed meats, charcoal foods, too many omega-6s from, again, like I said, too much processed foods, or especially like grain-fed meat, then really not good for you at all, and not enough omega-3s. So just, again, that's where that omega-3 test comes from. There's a reason why I say to take that for everybody really over the age of, let's say, like 35, 40 max. And that's because if you can get your omega-3 saturation rate up to 9%, you have a 90% risk reduction rate for cardiovascular death. Amazing statistic. Everyone, as part of my anti-aging practice, has to run that test. And the reason is that we need to make sure we optimize that for sure. Okay, genetics. Genetics is another one. Now, genetics is just there in the background. But if you have issues with any type of methylation or any type of COMT or any type of SOD, those markers within your body, and if you don't know what that means, that's okay. Because even if you never learn your genetics, you can control your genetics by eating a predominantly plant-based diet, lots of antioxidants, lots of fruit and veggies. Again, the fruits can be mainly low glycemic, such as berries. Lots of produce, just lots of greens, lots of reds, lots of blues, lots of purples, lots of all the different colors that we were given to help with this next thing as well, which is DNA damage. So if you've run a telomere test as well, you can start to see a shortening of telomeres if there's too much oxidative-based damage. I'll link up telomere testing today as well. These are all just things that show you how quickly your body is aging, okay? It's not always the shorter the telomere, the shorter the life. However, typically what it means is that it shows greater amounts of oxidative damage on the body. And the truth is that the longer the telomere, that typically does correspond with, though, a longer life as well. So really nice to check that out. And again, you can change that. I've done a whole episode. If you just type in telomere, TELOMERE. If you type that into stephencabral.com/podcasts, you'll be able to see all of my shows on telomeres and how to actually lengthen them and improve them. Okay? Check that out. And then not enough time for autophagy. Believe it or not, the National Institute for Health is actually talking about autophagy now. It's amazing. Or autophagy, however you like to pronounce it. I like both. And so here's the thing. Autophagy takes place when there is no new toxins or foods coming in. All right, so that's why I'm always recommending the 12-hour overnight fast, okay, for 99% of the population. That's 7 at night to 7 in the morning, 6 at night to 6 in the morning, however you want to do it, 12 hours, maybe 14 hours. But what you want to do is make sure that nothing new is coming in. You can have water, you can have ginger tea, that's okay. But I want your body to have at least half the day, overnight, not during the day, but overnight, to clean house, okay? That will allow your body exactly how it's been known, literally from right now as I'm recording this podcast. I'm actually in Mexico and I'm down here and I'm obviously enjoying myself thoroughly and getting some vitamin D for sure, which I try to do in these cold New England winters, but I'm learning a lot of the ancient Mayan techniques. So for me, it's one and the same, right? My life is dedicated to this whole thing we call wellness and natural health. I love it. It's a passion of mine. So I'm enjoying myself, and I'm enjoying myself to even a higher level by learning about that. I'm going to teach some of these things in the future as well on the podcast of these ancient Mayan techniques, but everyone knew the same exact thing. Like literally everyone knew the same exact thing. And it's amazing to me that we just have forgotten this over the past couple hundred years. That's the bottom line. You don't eat as it starts to get dark at night, and you start to eat as the sun rises. And when you eat, you have a light breakfast, a cleansing breakfast. you do not have heavy eggs and bacon. It does not make sense. I'm going to talk about that more in the future. The body is meant, took out all this waste at night, all this waste overnight when you're sleeping. You need to flush it from your system, not put in heavy foods. And I'll talk about that, the perfect breakfast, the flushing in the future as well. I'm making notes the whole time as I'm giving this podcast. So I'll write down flushing breakfast there. Okay, so the last thing we want to talk about before what you can do is a weakened immune system, ATP, and DNA replication. Okay, so with all of this inflammation, the end product is this, that our immune system starts to become weakened. We can develop this thing called molecular mimicry, where our body actually starts to attack other parts of the body that it recognizes as the same protein, the same antigen, the same microbe. That's definite. We know that. We know that with Klebsiella-based bacteria. We know how it affects other parts of the body as well. So it's interesting to look at. But here's what matters in the long run. If you're starting to feel a little run down, a little broken down, not rejuvenated as quickly as you would like to, you don't have the energy, you don't have the drive, you're starting to get more of the high blood pressure, high cholesterol, any of the type 2 diabetes, any of the weight gain, any of the swelling, anything like that, the poor circulation. Our job is to start to turn back the clock. What does that mean? Well, we need to start to remove the toxins, okay? We need to remove the toxins and replace the deficiencies. Now, I know you've heard me say that before, but it's the truth. As we start to age, our reserves for B vitamins are lower. Our reserves for vitamin C are lower. I run an organic acid test all the time, and I see how people's reserves have gone down unless they are supplementing, okay? Especially with vitamin C. That's one of the big ones as well. Okay, so what am I recommending? Well, if you feel like this is you, you have two options. The first option is that you can test, and you can run something like the Big 5 lab test. Now, if it's too expensive, if it's out of the range, I understand. You can also just pick the ones that are best for you. If you feel like you want to look at gut function, you want to look at your vitamin levels, you can run an organic acids test. If you want to look at heavy metals and the levels of overall stress in your body and the overall levels of minerals, you can run a hair tissue mineral analysis. If you want to look at your inflammation in terms of omega-6s to omega-3s, you can run an omega-3 test. If you want to look at your thyroid levels, if you want to look at your adrenals, meaning cortisol throughout the day, morning, noon, afternoon, and evening, to make sure you have a nice little diurnal curve, which is higher energy in the morning and lower in the evening. If you want to look at your testosterone, DHEA, progesterone, estrogen, all of those are included with that thyroid adrenal hormone test. That's an amazing test as well. And a lot of times you can say like, well, what if there was one more test I could add to that? Well, that would be a food sensitivity test. Why not look at the foods that you're eating on a typical daily basis and see if those are also causing inflammation, which means if you eat a food and you're sensitive to it, doesn't mean bloating. Bloating is not a food sensitivity. Bloating is a sugar-based or fermentation-based issue or bacterial-based issue. I'm talking about an inflammation issue, meaning like you eat eggs today and tomorrow you wake up with a little bit of the grogginess, the brain fog, the stiffness of the joints. That's an immune-based sensitivity from an IgG perspective. So those are essentially the big 5. There are more lab tests you can run like genetics and telomere testing. But what I always recommend first is balance your body, get healthy, and then you can start to do the anti-aging, which the anti-aging, of course, would just make sure you're doing the annual blood work. Just one genetic test, that's it. You never need to do it again. And then run a telomere test. That's it. And you run a telomere test like once a year if you wanted to, maximum to look at your telomeres. So that is what I recommend. That's Inflammaging. And if you didn't want to run the lab test, well, then you would start to just get an overall healthy protocol. And again, you have now 746 Cabral concepts. I mean, 747. Sorry, if I didn't mention it today, it's stephencabral.com/747. That is today's show number. That's where all the show notes will be, the lab tests. And my recommendation is this: do the 21-day Dr. Ball detox if you don't want to run the labs. Get your body clean. Start to maintain that with a healthy diet. Do something like the Dr. Ball Daily Protocol, which is your 22 organic fruits and vegetables and a greens powder. All organic, no inulin, no fillers. Do the daily nutritional support, so you're getting all of your vitamins to go along with all that whole food and your vegan-based protein powder. And your daily probiotic support. Like, that's a great place to start. But here's the deal. We can't not do nothing, right? We can't pretend it's not there. We just have to start to eliminate the toxins, literally like squeeze that sponge, wring it out, get those toxins out, start to live healthier, take more nutrients in. As you do that, you literally supply your body with the raw materials for life. If you put more life into your body, you will get more life out. I see that every single day in my practice, and I want the same for you. Thank you so much for tuning into another Cabral Concept. I really do appreciate each and every one of your listens. Thank you so much, and please feel free to share this episode with anyone you believe it could help. Before you go, I wanted to ask you this question. What if I could teach you in just a couple of hours how to transform your thyroid, hormones, adrenal, cholesterol, blood pressure, blood sugar, weight loss, energy, mood, brain, pregnancy, anti-aging, or many other health-related issues? After 20 years in private practice, after seeing and overseeing 250,000 client appointments, I sincerely feel I have the real-world data and have found the answer you've been searching for. So what I've done is spent hundreds of hours of my own time refining what you need to know in order to uncover your underlying root cause health issues and then begin to rebalance the body and bring it back to a state of robust health and wellness. I'm going to teach you exactly what I do in my private practice so you can understand how you got here and now what you need to do in order to heal. You'll receive all of the important success checklists, protocols, and even ways to customize it to make the program fit your busy life. And you'll get all of this at a fraction of the price. Let me save you the time, money, energy, stress, and frustration of not knowing what to do next. Instead of reading dozens of books on the topic and seeing multiple practitioners, I will condense everything that you need to know in just a few hours of video tutorials that you can watch and listen to anywhere. Together, we will make this healing process an enjoyable one that you can take with you for the rest of your life. I wish you all of the best of health and happiness, and I hope to be able to guide you on your healing journey through my Health Results Accelerators. Simply choose the health imbalance you're currently suffering from, and by the end of today, you'll know what went wrong and how to get well again. I guarantee it. For details, head over now to stevencabral.com/courses.